To start off, I'm wondering if each of you might be able to share a few thoughts on how you communicate the value that you place on the protection of children and youth at your church. How would a person who walks into your church know that you place a high emphasis on protecting children and youth? And we can start with you, Tiffany, because I see your notes.
Okay, I really want to communicate from the very first moment people walk in our door that we value safety for their kids. And so we have all new families that are dropping off their kids fill out a new family information card. And on the back of that card is just some basic information about our ministry. And one of the bullet points is that all of our leaders are background checked and screened and safety trained. So hopefully, when families come in our doors, they know that this is something that's a high priority for us. Uh, Further than that, if a family decides they want to become a member, I actually speak at the membership class about child safety and the high value we place on that here at Christchurch.
So Redeemer, where I'm at, is a little bit unique, but probably not to a lot of your churches in that we're a church plant. So we are on the smaller side at this point yet. We maybe a little bit uniquely, we kind of ask all the members of the church to spend some time volunteering in Redeemer Kids. And so that means that I have a lot of people who need to complete like the C4SO trainings and the ministry safe and that sort of thing. So we take for sure one Sunday a year, if not two, where I just like get up and address the whole congregation, like this is a priority for us and you will not be able to volunteer back there unless you've completed these things. I've had it just once where I've had to, like a volunteer has showed up and I've asked them many times to complete it. They couldn't get it done for whatever reason and just said like, we just take it so seriously that we can't have you volunteer. And then most of our congregation is really understanding of this, I will say, and has just been phenomenal because I think, unfortunately, in like our day and age today, like people know that like abuse can happen anywhere, and that includes the church. And then we have a lot of young families, so all their kids are in the program, and it's to their best interest as well, for protecting their own children. And I think that carries a lot of weight with them. And when we have visitors, I make sure that, they, similar to Tiffany, fill out a form, make sure we have their contact information. And I make sure, because we're small, I can make sure that I face-to-face with everybody right now when they come in. And I just do like a real brief rundown of like, these are the safety measures that we've taken. Everybody's passed a background check, all of those things. So I think that unique one-on-one opportunity, I don't know how long I'll be able to do that, but for right now, I think that communicates a lot of how we feel about safety.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ruby. How about you, Angela?
I would just echo what Tiffany and Ruby have both said. We have the information available for our new families, and it's part of our conversation in our congregation that, the safety of our kids is such a high value. And then, welcoming those new families and being able to have that personal conversation with them as they're, completing their form and things like that, just being able to kind of talk with them for a few minutes and, reassure them the safety measures that we have in place. And I agree with you, Ruby, as well, that, there have been very few volunteers people who are interested in volunteering within our congregation that are, just trying to understand a little bit better as to why we do all of these safety measures and things of that nature. Some of our older volunteers who maybe have, years and years and years of experience behind, a different church or something like that. And now this is all new versus, years ago. And But I will say that educating process and having it be part of just our regular dialogue and narrative
Mhm.
at our church is very helpful. And then in addition to that, I haven't ever had anyone go through the training and not come out on the other end feeling like that was a valuable, something valuable to them. They then understand the importance and they are on board. They are excited and about volunteering, and also they're thankful to have the tools that we gave them.
Awesome. Well, let's talk a little bit about challenges, and maybe just one or two challenges if you want to share an anecdote. Of course, not naming any names, but just a challenge that you faced in the last, year, 2 years, and how you overcame it
Mm.
related to the implementation of these policies and the training.
I think one thing I've learned is that sometimes the ministry safe training can be emotional or challenging for someone, especially if they've been a victim of abuse. And so I've learned to really, on the front end, say, hey, this is about a 45-minute to an hour long process. You can take time to get through it. It might bring up some feelings or emotions, especially if you've been a victim or know a victim of abuse. So prepping our volunteers to know that there are going to be things discussed that might be emotional for them has been one of the biggest challenges. And, you know, helping the volunteer to process some of those emotions on the back end and say, hey, I know this brought up a lot for you, but it is really necessary. This is something that is really valuable, even though it's hard to protect our kids from suffering, maybe what you have gone through.
Yes.
Yeah, I echo that a lot, Tiffany. I always, and the directors we've had at our church even before me have always really emphasized like it's not our desire to cause any more like secondary trauma, or we know it can be really uncomfortable. We know it's really difficult. And just encouraging people, like, if they're nervous about it at all or worried about it at all, like encouraging them, like, hey, we can do it together,
Mhm.
or so that you're not alone, or we can, have a conversation to talk through the things and just like go through them a little bit slower together. And I was honestly surprised. I've had several volunteers who have actually said, like, I'm not sure that I want to see any images, or I'm not sure that I can handle this. And so being very clear about like what the training is, and that
Mm.
there's not like images that are going to, um, you know, bring any more trauma to it. That it's like a safe environment to do it in. But they've always communicated that they're so thankful that we're having everybody do
Mhm.
that. So that's really encouraging to me to know too, that like I think it's an important ministry to them to show
Mhm.
that, we care. One of my biggest challenges, I think, with it is that I have so many well-meaning people who it doesn't matter how many emails they send, texts, announcements, all that stuff, where they're just busy and they're like,
Mhm.
where do I find that extra hour to do this thing? Or just like forgetting to get it done. Like it's an email that gets lost. So that is always a challenge, just like making sure everybody actually completes it and gets it done and tracking that. But again, that's a space where I am thankful that I can like pull them aside, see them in church, and just be like, hey. And usually once I've like done it one-on-one and face-to-face, they're like, yeah. Yeah.
I think that I've definitely encountered the challenges that y'all have talked about with being just kind of, it really puts us in a pastoral care role,
Mhm.
and even calling on the clergy if they desire to be able to talk through some of that when they're feeling a little triggered by, the idea of having to sit through this type of a training. And I will say two other examples of just challenges that have come up for us in the past year. One, I had a volunteer that kind of has a computer background and is just really not comfortable with having their data out there for background checking and things like that. I say a potential volunteer. And so, we tried some, would you be comfortable with this? Would you be comfortable with that? You know, just trying to, really understand the situation. And it just wasn't the background check. There was no way to run the background check at the level that we run it. Um, that was going to be in a comfortable place for him. And so he and his wife were not going to be able to volunteer. However, they were excited to get to, we kind of came up with another, you can always get creative, right? We came up with another solution for, instead of volunteering at youth group, what they were able to do is with their teen boys, they send the snacks and the drinks with youth group each week, which is a huge help for me. But also, they feel like they're contributing and they're a part of the group, even though they're not physically present. And so that ended up being a way to still help them feel included at a comfort level for them. So I just would encourage anyone who's, just having some challenges, just pray about it. And I feel like, there's always something that will come to mind, that you can try. Another challenge, and I've had this challenge in this past year, but also previously, is some of our seniors don't have either an email address or a computer. And that poses a challenge with Ministry Safe. Everything is tied to an email address. So our workaround, just in case someone's out there that has had, some of this challenge, because our seniors are just jewels. They're just gold. We love having them come in and work with the little ones or prep materials or be on hand for VBS as a greeter. And so what we've done is they've come in and we have created an email account for them just for this purpose, and sat and gone through with them because they're not familiar with they're a little intimidated by a computer and how to take the quizzes and that sort of thing. And so that ended up being and that they don't use the email address for anything else, but that ended up being just a workaround that we were able to come up with so that we could continue having, both of those folks are in their 80s and we just love them so much. So we were grateful to get to keep them on the team.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
Well,
Let's see what our next question is. Let's see here. Oh, so how do you proactively and you've alluded to this already, but how do you provide that proactive care where it's not a fear-based response? It's just something that this is a part of our church culture. This is a part of our DNA. We're not doing this because we want to instill fear in you or, I'm sure just from having young children myself, like there are some parents that they completely shelter their children from like anything that could be remotely upsetting. So it's like we're not trying to scare people, but how do you guys go about that in a maybe more organic way?
I would say that for us, it's just kind of going back to that narrative of, it being a constant conversation that's happening within the walls of our church and beyond. We are, safety is a constant conversation piece that comes up in different ways. That it's not just with the volunteers, but also with the parents. And, not the volunteers aren't going to remember everything they received at fall training all the time. So it's really helpful for everyone to just continue to be repetitive in different opportunities. So for example, one of the things the kids love to do is to come into a multi-purpose room after church while the parents are in the narthex with coffee and conversation. And I love that they feel like all the spaces of the church are theirs. But they'll come in, and if I'm in there and there's not another adult, I'm just like, oh gosh, we don't have another adult. Sorry guys, y'all need to head on out. And they've gotten in the habit now of they'll come in, they'll see that I'm the only one in there, and they will go ask their parent to come stand in the room, one of the parents who are trained, and to come and stand in the room so that they are able to be in that space after church while I'm packing things up or finishing some things up. So, I mean, that's just one example, but it's one of those things where as we continue to have those comments and conversations, I had a teacher just the other day who was a teacher last year even, and she was out of the habit, didn't think, and she said, oh, I need to run and grab such and such. I said, you know what, let me grab that for you, because two adults in the room, just kind of gave that reminder. And she's like, oh gosh, I'm so sorry. And I said, no problem. This is something that we just kind of share with the adults, and outside of training, but also within training, about how important it is to keep our kiddos safe and our volunteers safe. And this is for everyone. And it makes it the best environment possible to be able to minister to the kids. And everyone gets on board with that. There's no one that says, no, I don't want our kids to be safe. So
That's true.
One way that I sort of handled tried to keep it from being a fear-based response, is that we use some materials that I share sort of as like extra resources. And I've used some of those materials that are very kid-friendly, intended for kids. So two of my favorite ones are God Made All of Me, and then ABCs of Child Safety. And just like having those available for the parents if they want them, helping them sort of see like, we're not doing this because we're scared, and there are really safe ways to present this to your children without scaring them. I think back to like when I grew up and everything was like stranger danger, and then but from like a perspective of wanting to be welcome and loving people and those sorts of things, something about that feels off, right? And so I really appreciate those resources that are geared towards kids, and that are just very important for giving them the language to talk about it, right? Like we emphasize, like, we don't keep secrets, like if an adult says to you, like, oh, can you like keep the secret? I'm going to tell you this thing that's just for you. Like I've heard the kids in our program being like, oh, like we don't keep secrets here. And I just feel so proud of them. But it's like a natural response for them. And so I think that takes away a lot of the fear around it when kids are good at advocating for themselves, but not in a way that they're scared. Just like, like, oh, it's something we do. And I mean, I also like that because my bent tends to be towards children geared materials anyway, and they're usually so user friendly that I think it's just helpful to change the tone of the conversation.
One thing that we've really done is provided childcare in safe, vetted environments for things such as our life groups and for different programming that we have, because of our value of safety for kids. And if adults have to meet in homes, that's not always the safest environment for a kid. So there's some practical things that we can provide as the church, to ensure safety of our kids, not because we're afraid, but just because we know best practices, we know safe environments. And I think as children's ministry directors, we need to look around and be the eyes and ears. So for me, that means staying at kind of that high level, that helicopter view, so that I can see all the spaces and look at them with fresh eyes on a regular basis. We just revamped and remodeled our student area so that every door in the entire area has a big window in it, just to ensure that child safety. We've just propped the doors open and left them open, but we've just eliminated even the possibility of having an unsafe environment. So I think, as ministry directors, keeping that high view, elevating the safety of kids to a priority in every program that we run. And, as a church, it's taken tons of resources and energy to provide childcare for our life groups, but the value of kids is so high in our mind that we just think it's important. And so I think structuring your programming around safety for kids is really key.
Gosh, you guys are like a gold mine. Thank you so much. So we've already kind of talked about like how you guys build confidence in parents to leave their children in your care. I know one of you shared that you make kind of that face-to-face connection with them. You have them fill out the forms. If they have any questions, you welcome those questions. Is there anything else you wanted to share kind of along those lines?
Kind of along those lines, and we have touched on some of this too, and it goes along with like addressing it from a non-fear-based place. But I think the more consistent we are about bringing it up with our church body, and like, you know, the more our church has gotten used to like, oh, this is just what we do every year. We watch this training, or every 2 years or whatever. And so that it doesn't feel like it comes from a place of fear, and it also sort of provides just that sense of like, we can trust them because they continue to prioritize this. It's just a strong message that can come across from, because it is so easy sometimes to just want to be really lenient, right? To be like, oh, okay, well, that kid's parent didn't fill it out, but it's probably fine. And it's more work to like go find the parent and all of those things. But that consistent messaging all the way across the board, I think, does wonders for building trust.
Absolutely. Tiffany, I think you had in your notes mentioned something about having an open door policy where parents can drop by anytime
Yeah.
unannounced. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, I think as we work with parents, just making sure that they feel comfortable that they can have eyes on any part of our programming, and they're welcome to stay with their child, sit with them, and make sure the child feels very comfortable, make sure they feel very comfortable, especially with new families, and just ensuring that we are open door at all times. They are welcome to come in and ask us any questions. Angela had said it earlier, just having that spirit of transparency and vulnerability. And I think also, this happens sometimes where a parent will point out something that did not go well, and to accept that humbly and say, oh, you are so right. And we are going to work to change that immediately. I think being responsive to parents and their concerns, their questions, their needs is really key as well.
It's so good. Anything else, Angela? Do you have anything you wanted to add? Okay, well then I think oh, sorry, did I cut you off, Angela? No? Okay. The way I'd like to end is I'd love to hear your advice for a new church plant who is kind of just trying to create this culture of care, and who maybe it's a stretch for them to have two trained volunteers in the room at all times. I know this challenge because I planted a church with my husband, and it was just a constant challenge, especially we were like always meeting at our house, and we were meeting, in a separate area of the house, and the kids could come in whenever they wanted, but I didn't have eyes on them at all times. So just for somebody who's, in a very small, like just church with maybe 20 people, what are just a few practical words of advice and maybe encouragement that you could give them?
I think one thing that I would share is, like, even in this sort of situation that you were referencing, Andrea, where it's a really small church, you might be meeting in a home, you might be meeting, in like a senior citizen center or a gym or whatever space. That's maybe not the most, you don't have like a full children's ministry wing, which is the situation that we're in right now. Is that from day one, or as early as you possibly can, you still treat it like it's, an official church. You give that, you say like, we recognize that we only have 20 or 50 people or whatever, and that we know you all so well. but like this is so key and important, and will be continue to be key and important as our church, grows, Lord willing, which is the goal with a lot of small church plants. And so just emphasizing like right from the get-go, even if it feels like it's extra or like too much, which I think we feel sometimes in small, trusting communities. It's easier to stay with something strong and consistent that you started than it is to build it in later on.
Yes, absolutely.
I agree with you. And I think that I would encourage, not just with church plants, but, children and family ministers, even with larger churches, it's to just join up with a group such as like the C4SO Children and Families Network, and be able to visit and share your experiences and glean from others who have been there before and may have ideas for how to work around in some of those, like you're saying, Ruby, some of those specific instances where you're in the home or different things like that, and you're trying to come up with a solution. How can we keep the kids safe in this unique situation? And I've just seen a lot of really great ideas and resources shared there that, we're all in this together and we don't have to recreate the wheel.
Yeah. I think also just appointing a person, especially in a small community, who is thinking about this to say, they don't even have to be a staff member, to say, hey, this is an area where we want to be excellent. Can you help us be excellent in this area of our ministry? And we can create the perfect plan, we can execute everything perfectly, and things can still go wrong. So I think my second encouragement would be to ask the Lord for protection. It is really key to be prayerful about this and to ask the Lord to protect our communities, because this is an area that can just destroy and damage in such a huge way. And so asking the Lord to give us vision, give us insight, give us discernment. And then I think even just deputizing everyone in your community, especially in a small, tight knit community. But we do this at every training. Say, if you see anything that makes you feel even a little bit uncomfortable, this is the Holy Spirit speaking through you. So please bring that to light. We want everything to be brought into the light. So those those things are really key as you're talking to all your people and elevating safety and security in every area of your ministry.
Wow, you guys have blown me away. Thank you so much for doing this. I I'm just honestly so thankful that we have all of y'all in our diocese and willing to share these amazing insights. So, is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you feel like you want to share? Angela, maybe you could say a little more about the network, and that you have a monthly meeting, and I can include the link or anything you want people to know about that network.
So I would just encourage, if you're listening and you're looking for a group of, men and women who are ministering to children, ministering to families, and especially in the Anglican tradition, it is so great to get to share ideas with and challenges and different things like that with others who are doing the same. And we gather together to do that very thing, sharing resources, and especially just praying for one another. We always close our time together with being able to pray for one another and lift each other up in whatever the needs that we have. But we have an every other month, we have just a gathering for about an hour over Zoom. Our next one is on September 27th. It's at 11 o'clock Central Standard Time. And each time that we gather together, we cover a different topic that's coming up. This next time, we're actually going to be diving into Advent, because it's time. It's time to start getting just kind of some of those resources shared and be thinking. And just some really great resources have been shared. We have a Slack channel that we are able to pass along, links to different things and ask questions. And we just really enjoy that time together. We always like to open with how we've seen God working in our lives and our ministry. And that has just been such a wonderful and positive thing of being able to turn to the Lord first. And then we have our discussion time and close in that prayer. So we would hope that anyone who is interested, please join us. Like I said, our next meeting is on September 27th.